just want to say thank you so much for Immedis for sponsoring this event. They've been great throughout 2020 and have supported us on a number of initiatives and have been very gracious when we've had to move it to a virtual event, and again, very supportive. So, so thank you for making this possible. Ideally, have your cameras on. Let's make it an interactive session. If you can just stay on mute whilst the presenters are presenting, but if you do have any questions, we will have time at the end of the presentation to ask questions. The session is being recorded and the slides will be available at the end of this event. So if you do have any questions, if you're feeling a bit shy and you do have any questions, please feel free to add them to the chat box. But otherwise, please feel free to unmute your microphone and let's have a talking session. So as you can see, here are our speakers. So Rory, would you like to introduce yourself to everyone?
Yeah, hi everyone. My name is Rory Keller. I'm the CEO of Immedis, and looking forward to talking about a bit of how payroll is going to be impacting on the employee experience, more so into the future.
Thank you, Rory. And over to you, Lee.
Hi there, Mel. Hi, everyone. Yeah, I'm a global mobility tax partner at Blick Rothenberg, and I'm going to be talking today about the trend, which has been accentuated by and accelerated by COVID, of globally remote workers, and also saying a few words as well about Brexit and where that leaves us from a payroll and social security perspective.
Thanks, Lee. And over to you, Andrew.
Hi, yes, I'm Andrew. Nice to meet everyone. I'm going to be talking to you today about how changing some of the processes internally in your own systems can help in a COVID environment, and actually not just in COVID environments, for the better across how we go back into the new normal.
Yeah, Andrew recently won one of our awards at the GPA, so I thought it would be great to introduce Andrew to our audience and to explain a little bit about what he's previously, well, what you've done in 2020 really. So so thank you for joining us today. Okay, so sorry, I've got a lot going on my screen at the moment, so let me just move that. So today's agenda: the global payroll trends that are impacting employee experience. What are the implications of your employees working at home in countries that they do not normally work in? And then we're going to have a 5-10 minute network session, and then enabling business growth during COVID-19. Okay, so I'm going to pass you over to Rory. So I'm just going to stop sharing my screen. Bear with me. So Rory, you can share your screen.
Right. Can you see that?
Not yet. We have actually tested this out, so it was working 2 seconds ago. So it's always the way, isn't it?
Yeah, there we go.
There you go.
Can you see that?
Just coming. Yeah, just need to put it onto the slideshow.
It disappears when I do that. Can you still see the slideshow?
Yeah, we can. Yeah, that's not a problem.
Okay, yeah, thanks a million, and great to have everyone here today. And kind of thanks Mel for having us again. We're always delighted to sponsor these events, and it's great to be able to talk about all things happening in global payroll. So when we spoke earlier on, I thought, what is the impact on the employee experience? I think employee experience, employee engagement is something that's becoming more and more topical, and even more so now in 2020. With such a remote workforce and that inability to actually be physically in touch with people as much as previously. So what I'm going to run through today is kind of what I see, some of the trends that are happening in global payroll and how they can help impact a more positive employee experience, and then ultimately why are they so important. I'll fly through this. I've kind of introduced myself already, CEO of Immedis. So Immedis is a global payroll technology company, and we're just 4 years old now, and previously part of the TaxBack group and specializing in global mobility tax, where we manage a lot of kind of big global enterprise organizations, full employee populations. I'm responsible as a CEO for the corporate direction and strategy. My own background is in the global mobility taxback sector, so I have kind of an understanding of the most complex parts of payroll, which kind of gives us a good in-depth knowledge of the business. So this was a quote I saw, which I thought would really resonated when I saw it, and I thought, you know, happy employees ensure happy customers, and happy customers ensure happy shareholders. And the fact that it's in that order, like a lot of organizations, you know, it's the customer first, it's customer, 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 customer. You know, what I see and what we see in our own organization, and a lot of the organizations we work with, is that, you know, the satisfaction of the employee is ultimately probably the most impactful thing on happy customers. If you have a disillusioned workforce or an unhappy culture or environment, that has a knock-on impact to how well you serve the customer, and ultimately then how successful the organization is. So, you know, I think this is becoming more and more topical, where, you know, you talk about, you know, how well the employee experience, the detail and the amount of options that employees want now around their pay, around their benefits, around a lot of different options, around their ability to work remotely, etc. You know, it's grown so much over the last number of years, and, you know, or the organizations that are able to manage that and understand it are those that are most successful in terms of having that kind of good culture and ultimately high growth curves with their customer base. So, you know, one of the first ones, and as Mel said, please jump in if you have any questions. I don't like talking for 25 minutes.
Sorry to interrupt. We can't see when you're changing your slides. It's not changing the slides on the screen.
All right. Are you seeing the slideshow?
Yeah, we can see it's stuck on the first slide, the global payroll trends that are impacting. Do you want me to see if I can share the screen, share my screen, if that helps?
Yeah, yeah. I'll stop sharing.
Sorry, guys. If you let me just see if I can. Sorry, it's gonna take forever to set up. Sorry, I've closed my email down. Catherine, I don't know if you've got Rory's slides to hand, because it might be easier if you can share.
Let me have a look.
So it's the last event, and then this is what. So first of all, it does it for the payroll awards, and now the last event of 2020, it now wants to do this to me. So I think I'm being told something, aren't I? Do you want to should we go on to lead, do you think, Rory, and then we can come back to you? Oh no, here Catherine's got hers. Oh, thanks, Catherine.
Is that, yeah, let me just check it out.
Can you just go to slideshow?
Yeah, can you see
there
the
we go. Thank you. Can you see? Is that all right, Rory? Can you see?
Yeah. Right.
Thank you.
So this was the quote I was talking about. Apologies for that. So kind of going to move into a number of different areas, Catherine. If we just move to the next slide, next two slides actually, in terms of payroll moving to the cloud. I think there's no, I think some of you may have seen these stats before, but the one on the left to me is just incredibly impactful. That, you know, 49% of the workforce will start looking for a new job if they experience two problems with their paycheck. And to me, that comes down to, does the employee trust their organization? Like, is there reliability and capability within the organization to get one of the most fundamentals correct for their staff and for their employees? And, you know, this just shows, you know, when you look at the cost of recruitment, the cost of replacement of good quality employees, and the fact that something what should be something table stakes or so basic, that, you know, the amount of errors that happen and the actual massive impact it has on employees' engagement and experience with the organization, that only with two errors, you know, one in every two employees begins to start looking for a new job. And when you look at, you know, what are organizations doing to ensure that they're best set up to understand and manage that risk. And when you see the number of organizations that are on cloud-based platforms or automated solutions, you know, it's still very low. And, you know, not just because we come from a technology background, but, you know, there is a kind of a common stat out there that, you know, when you do a manual at scale, the error rate is generally about 8% at any scale. So no matter how good the person is, you know, if you are doing a repetitive process at scale, when you're talking 3,000-5,000 employees and you're trying to do that in a manual way without automation, a good person will get 5% of the stuff wrong. So organizations that don't put in place technology, automation, processes to mitigate against that are really setting themselves up to fail with their employee experience. So, you know, I would encourage organizations to look, what are the processes that are currently in place? How automated are they? And, you know, which parts of the processes should be able to utilize technology to be able to do a lot of the review and analysis? And you know, the amount of different technologies that are out there around data ingestion, data validation, data migration, you should be able to use a mixed sets of tool sets or a platform like Immedis to be able to analyze data from, you know, a data first perspective and not from a payroll where it's a manual process and it's a manual review, because you ultimately will make mistakes. Do you want to move to the next one, Kat? So obviously this is the most topical one at the moment. You know, in 2020, the rise in remote working. You know, I know some of the guys are going to touch on this, but you know, when you look at 4 out of 5 workers in the world are now working from home, what are the tax implications? And the tax and payroll implications now could be anything depending on what country that person is in. So how do you know where your staff are? What control mechanisms do you have? How do you have a central view of your employee experience to see what are the trends, what are the risks that you need to manage, and to be able to move very quickly? Obviously, none of us expected this to happen, but you know, what basic processes and technologies do you have in place that will allow, you know, when you look at the number of people, and we've done this internally ourselves, like the vast majority of people will want to have that flexibility on a go forward basis. So, you know, how well set up is your organization to manage that risk? And to actually offer that sort of flexibility to the organizations and to your employees, and having, you know, a payroll organization that really understands global, really understands the moving parts and the different legislations and the regulations in different countries, and how that ties back into an overall comp and ben reward structure on a global level, because most global companies try to have an aligned comp and ben structure globally. You know, you need to be able to understand the data, you need to understand the implications, and like you need to understand the cost benefit analysis of being able to analyze the cost of payroll and align that with what the wants of the employee workforce are. Like, my view is I don't think it's ever going to go back to normal the way it was. I think we're always going to have this flexible workforce now, and organizations really need to be ready for it and really need to have an understanding that this is about an employee ask, and employees will want this, and a lot of organizations will offer it. And if your organization is not geared or set up to manage that, or have the technologies in place to be able to analyze it and give that experience back to the employees, it's going to be a negative experience for the employees, and ultimately you're going to lose their top talent. So like, these are just some of the points. I won't go through them in detail, but like, you know, these are just some of the key points that tie into this. So, you know, it's really vital to understand the country requirements. Like, is there, you know, a lot of the HR systems don't go to the last mile on the payroll requirements in relation to benefits, etc., and country specific information. It's really important that from a payroll perspective, there's an understanding of the specific requirements in countries and how these affect the compliance reporting and how they affect the payroll process itself. The operational controls. So, like, you know, do you have a single operating process globally? Do you have it on a jurisdictional basis? Do you have it on a local basis? And having a technology and oversight to be able to ensure that it's flexible and adaptable to whatever your employee requirements are. And compensation accumulation is probably one of this time of year when people, and maybe most people probably finalize budgets going into next year, but it's something, you know, it's really beneficial. And, you know, I'll touch on it later on about understanding, you know, gender, the diversity, inclusion, a lot of these, you know, really good initiatives that are happening now, understanding the compensation data across multiple jurisdictions, understanding how it works and how your organization, you know, as opposed to taking a subjective view and having a feeling that you're in the right place, you're going in the right direction, actually having data, cross-jurisdictional, cross-functional, understanding exactly what your pay rates are, what your bands are, and from a total cost of employment, not just from a from a base salary perspective. Cross-functional communication, I'll touch again on this later on. The communication is critical between payroll, HR, and finance to get this right. The employees need to have that engagement, and they need to have a feeling that their payroll is accurate and it's going to be right, and all of the different stakeholders within the organization are aligned in ensuring that that happens. Next. So as I said, it's, how do organizations, I know in the UK it's a requirement now, but how do organizations actually understand where they are today in relation to a pay equality across a multitude of different areas, from a gender, age, jurisdictional? How do you analyze that on a multi-jurisdictional basis without understanding all of the key components of the data, being able to actually analyze the data in a structured format? It's probably outside of the HR system, unless the HR system has all of, a lot of our customers where we've got, you've got the HR system, you've got the benefit system, you've got share option systems, you have a multitude of systems that feed into the payroll system. And the payroll system is generally the most accurate reporting of the ultimate pay for employees. So, this is a really, really important issue for employees at the moment. And, organizations really need to understand where their gaps exist and ultimately why do they exist. And only then, when you do a root analysis of that, can you actually put a plan in place to go about improving. And ultimately the positive outcomes of that is an ability to attract and retain top talent. I'm not sure if anyone, or I'm sure people on this call have read the Netflix book, but the power of having top talent in this day and age is just unreal. So being able to have an engaged employee workforce and the top talent, it's just so vital for the success of any organization. And having these and having clear, concise, transparent information around how good an organization you are is really important to employees, and it's becoming more and more important kind of every day almost. So Catherine, right? So I thought this was an interesting stat. It was like 50% of employees, and say I'm not surprised by it, but financial and money matters is the biggest stress that people have on a day-to-day basis. So what are organizations doing to alleviate that? And what plans, what programs, what are we using in the payroll systems? What are we using in the payroll analysis to actually improve or alleviate that stress, where there's a lot of clarity for the employees and understanding? And back to the point earlier on, is there trust in the organization that you're going to get the payroll right? And we've seen from start earlier on how dangerous that is, or how damaging it is if you don't have that right. So being able to proactively support your employees on financial well-being is critical. And there's a number of things I'm going to touch on later on from a technology point in the direction of travel. I see these things going where technology can help. Some of them are in play already, and I think that there's ones that are coming down the road in the not too distant future. But ultimately, if you can get it right, and if you can show proactive approach to financial well-being for your employees, and that's dealing with benefits, the right looking types of benefits program, a flexible benefit program, which I think is more and more important, not treating everyone all the same, giving people options. Employees and engagement are looking for options these days to fit in with their lifestyle. And the payroll function and the HR function needs to be adaptable to be able to take multi-data feeds from different systems, so you can actually provide a full suite of offerings to your employees, which ultimately gives you a massive competitive advantage in hiring the top talent, an increase in productivity, and gives you a much higher improved employee engagement and retention, which from a cost perspective to an organization is just a no-brainer. So these are probably the two. What would an employer benefit from the most? or what would an employee benefit from OC added in the future? 27% financial wellness benefit to access to unbiased counsellors, and 17% help understanding and using the benefits. We see this in our own organization. We did a review on it last year where, you know, organizations get into kind of a culture or just a cadence of, you know, no one really understands the benefit. They just become part of the package where, you know, they're not fully utilized. They're not the right packages in certain circumstances. It's not the right healthcare. It's not the right pension. It's not the right share option scheme, because it's just something that happened to be there 5 years ago or 10 years ago, and it's just always done the same way. So actually helping staff and helping employees understand the benefits, so you actually get maximum utilization. It's generally a zero cost gain to the organization. But the upside of actually having people utilize something that you're paying for on a much fuller basis is a no-brainer. And I think that's about engagement through the payroll system. So, you know, can the payslip become a lot more engaging with the employee as opposed to just being a static document that, you know, basically gives you a gross to net analysis, but actually doesn't give you a huge amount of value add, where it's probably it's the document that employees engage with. You know they're going to engage with it on a weekly or a monthly basis. You have, you know, a captive audience to be able to share, you know, improvements, financial wellness tips, you know, understanding of the benefits, understanding of the tax code, understanding, you know, it's a really powerful tool that just a really powerful opportunity that just goes completely unutilized. So, you know, it has to become the norm, and, you know, we see it in the technologies now. It's, you know, technology capability is there to do a lot more for the employees, and, you know, organizations need to be willing to kind of free themselves up to allow that thinking that, you know, it's not just a pure gross to net process. It's got to be what's the ultimate use of the net pay of the employee, and how do you maximize that for your employees? So, and how do you give them an understanding and education around that? So these are four of the tech trends that I believe that are going to ones to watch. Some are already here. So my view is over the next probably 2 to 5 years, the employee self-service in relation to payroll is going to become far more common. And I actually believe that the employee's persona, for want of a better term, is going to become more and more of their own, which moves around with them as they move on in their career. And to me, that self-serve piece goes back to the ability to access a multitude of benefit options and be able to, you know, if it's bank details, if it's, you know, I want to get paid into, you know, half my salary into Revolut, or in half it into, you know, Barclays, or I want to change that on an ongoing basis. I might be going on holidays. Employees want to be able to manage their own, you know, financial well-being. They want to have flexibility, and they want to be able to divert and engage with their own salaries. On-demand pay, digital wallets, they're already there. I do think when we talk about employee engagement, employee well-being, it's an area that I think organizations need to be careful of. I do think employees are going to, it's going to be a demand piece, but I think there is a social obligation for people to make sure that it doesn't become, you know, that payday lending becomes, you know, a more dangerous tool, because, you know, you don't have any pay left and you're still going down the lending route. So, you know, I think organizations have a role to play in, like, you know, corporate responsibility and around financial wellness and education and discipline around the earnings of salaries. As I touched on earlier on, payslip as a communication channel. Not only do I think it's going to be a communication channel and, you know, a utilization of being able to push out information, I think payslip to me represents, like, you know, probably I could make this up, but probably one of the single biggest sources of financial wealth in the world, if you think about how many people get paid on a regular basis. So I believe that has the ability to turn into a marketplace where you can offer through the payslip your employees far more options in relation to utilizing it again. So I mentioned earlier on, like the ability to move the money in different directions, but also actually to get more for the money if that's a marketplace in relation to kind of an ad tech platform where employees can benefit through, you know, bulk buying, and where they get more for their euro or their dollar or their pound than they would just from a gross pay. And I think, you know, the technology is there already, and it's now about how bringing it to life and bringing it in that organizations are comfortable around it. And then finally, you know, technology supporting financial wellness. I just, you know, it's just really important. It's really critical that we use the technologies that are there available, that we can provide employees engagement and well-being around their financial wellness. Like it's a critical component to what any organization should be doing for their employees. So I think that's kind of it. Whistle stop. You know, I think, you know, final one, you know, the key for global payroll, you know, I think it's continuing to move, and it's actually moving there a lot faster over the last couple of years than I thought it would. And I think, you know, payroll continues to move much more towards being a strategic business partner than a processor. And, you know, it is a really, really key function. And when you look at the importance of, you know, I just go back to that number at the start. 1 in every 2 employees will leave if you mess this up. Like, that is just something an organization cannot afford to get. And an organization really needs to understand, for its own employee engagement and well-being, what are they doing to put in place a system or a process or a platform that allows it to scale and be adaptable for payroll for employees. So I think that's it. Thanks a million. Happy to take as many questions, or if there's any there, but on anything.
Yeah, Rory, I've been talking about the financial well-being for a lot over the last 6-7 weeks. There seems to be like it seems to be like a very popular topic, and I just wondered if there's anybody on today that if they have an opinion on it, because it really seems to, people either love the idea of it, or there's a camp that really hate the idea of, you know, offering the, you know, being able to take down your salary. So I just wondered if anybody else had any sort of feelings at all towards the whole topic of it.
It's around the on-demand pay.
Yeah, on-demand pay. Yeah, sorry, I always forget what it's called. Yeah, on-demand pay.
Yeah.
So there seems to be like 2 camps. There's some people that are really positive and some that are really against the idea. But I feel like it's definitely going to start happening. You know, it's the way forward for the employee experience. So I just wondered if anybody else had any sort of thoughts at all on it at all.
Hi Mel, hi Rory, it's Simon from Discovery. We don't actually offer that at the moment at Discovery, but it is obviously it's of interest, you know, and I think as you know, move forward, people are going to be sort of expecting that, as you say. I'm just interested in some of the challenges and problems that you may be aware of with that, you know, because it is a very new thing, but I'm just wondering, you know, have you seen any problems with it, any sort of issues, and what sort of things would you recommend to sort of mitigate those?
Yeah, I've heard of, we've spoken to a few people with it. So like, I get the concept of it. I think, you know, the concept of it is, you know, ultimately you're running payroll all the time, and you should be able to achieve technology. And, you know, if you work today, you'd be paid for it. And, you know, it's positioned as a, you know, a good social responsibility thing because it's better than payday lending. It definitely is. I don't think payday lending is good at anything, but the concern is that, you know, at least in payday lending, you still have your pay to come in to pay it. On-demand pay, you literally just if the organization allows 100% on-demand pay, you know, the employee, you know, if they're young, or if they're, you know, inefficient or not very structured in their financial well-being, and, you know, I think an organization has a responsibility to try and educate their employees around that. You know, it can be dangerous, I think, that, you know, you come to the end of the month and you've actually spent all your money and you've nowhere to go, and, you know, you've actually spent your rent money. So I think organizations need to be careful, and I think, you know, if we were going down it, I think we will go down it, but it will definitely be, I think, for our own organization, I think you need to understand the caps in place and how much you allow to be drawn down.
That's a good point. Thanks, Rory. And I think you're right. I mean, sort of tying that up with the financial well-being piece, you know, surgeries, workshops, all that good stuff is essential, you know, because otherwise, you know, you could imagine a few people, you know, getting themselves into a few problems.
I think possibly the other aspect on that, Rory, is the business management side, of course, especially in the current climate when businesses are managing on very small margins in some sectors and cash flow is a trouble. I suppose expectations around putting something like that in place and then having to withdraw it potentially later because you can't sustain it is also another kind of factor, I guess, from a business point of view rather than the employee.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And depending on the kind of what your business model is, and you know, if you're a business that's on 30 days and you're paid at the end of every month, and it's kind of that cyclical nature. I would say, I think what will come off the back of this is there'll be different finance products that will come out of the back of it in terms of almost like what do you call it, like credit lending against it. And I've seen some organizations already start that up. Again, there's pros and cons to that as well in organizations, especially young organizations or smaller organizations need to be very careful in terms of how you engage with that.
Okay, right. I think we're just so we keep on time. Thank you so much, Rory. And we'll have a chance later on if anybody does have any more questions, or if you do have a question, you know, just feel free to put it in chat and then we can ask Rory afterwards. But over to you now then, Lee. It's your time. I don't know if you've just frozen actually. Hopefully you haven't. Lee has gone missing. just the right time. Oh, this is challenging. Lee, you give me a heart attack. You just went.
I did. My internet just give out for a second or two there.
Okay.
I'm back. Don't worry.
2020 just keeps on giving.
I know. It's the gremlins in the system.
That's it. Are you happy to share your screen?
Yeah, for sure. Just bear with me a second. Okay.
And if anybody has any questions during your presentation, are you okay for them to ask you during, or would you like people to ask at the end?
Yeah, absolutely fine for people to just jump in.
Okay.
No problem at all. Can you see that?
Yes, please. Yeah, I can.
Okay.
Fabulous. Thank you, Lee.
Wonderful. Very briefly, I introduced at the start, but I'm a global mobility tax partner of over 20 years, work across many sectors, part of Blick Rothenberg. So we work in the UK, but of course, given what we do in global mobility tax, we work globally as well. Absolutely agree with what Rory was saying earlier about payroll, especially in the modern, current age and with international working, but also the different ways that people are now working, flexible hours, 0 hours, cross-border workers, international commuters. It's, there's a lot goes behind the payroll, as many of you all know, in order to get that right. And so one of the things I was going to do today was really just take a look at some of the detail around globally remote workers, and then also just touch a little bit on Brexit, given where we're at with or not at, as the case may be, with negotiations. So firstly, with globally remote workers, I mean, I guess when we went into lockdown in March here in the UK, pretty much all the secondments we deal with across the team, or at least the planned secondments, were put on halt for obvious reasons. And indeed, we thought, we were probably going to be sat quiet for a good few months, but that really wasn't the case. And a big reason for that was the fact that, perversely, people weren't moving anymore, but they were actually relocating and either getting stuck or deliberately staying in countries where they're not normally employed. So, we had a lot of EU nationals who were working in the UK for UK organisations, but decided due to COVID to repatriate to their home countries and work from home there in their home countries. So we're going to look at that today and just some of the stuff we've been doing in that area, that really to help you think through, I guess, any situations that you might have and any things that you're currently dealing with, and responding to employee questions in that regard. So globally remote workers, I mean, it's not a new thing. There's always been people who have worked in a country where their employer isn't located. But as Rory alluded to earlier, COVID has really supercharged that trend, if you like, and absolutely agree with the earlier sentiment that from all that we see, I think this is something that will stick, and not to the same degree, but I think just from the sentiment coming from employees currently, and even new hires as well, putting pressure on organizations to say, well, do you know what, can I just do this job from Italy? I think is going to increase on organizations. So even where people don't want to adopt globally remote working as a kind of, an approach in organizations, I think to some degree organizations are going to be forced to at least consider it, I think. So, globally remote working, as I said, people who are forced through COVID, but also people are being hired as well for the first time working in another country. Just a few stats there. I'm not going to go through them all, but just really to highlight what I was saying just a moment ago in terms of the fact that, this really is something which is changing mindsets. You have all seen this domestically with people working from home. I have people in my own team who've basically said, can I just stay at home now forever? Some people, conversely are clamoring to get back to the office, but it is changing mindsets, and that will have an impact. And the international sphere is absolutely no different in that regard. So we've seen actually a huge variety of different scenarios over the last 6 months, from organizations which have dozens and dozens of people who are overseas. And initially people were like, well, it's okay, it'll be a couple of months, then we'll be back in the UK and things will be normal again. And of course that didn't happen. So it's gone on longer and longer. So in many cases, people have started to sort of lay down working routes in countries where they don't normally work. And some are quite enjoying it now. They're able to be with family and extended family again. They've not got the cross-border element anymore. They're living in a country which they're familiar with, etc., etc. So we're seeing a lot of that. And also, I think individual cases as well, where people are actually just saying, well, I was locked down for a couple of months, but I want to stay here now. And also organizations, to be fair, although they're in the minority, I think at the moment, who are saying, well, yeah, we should be encouraging this because actually we can see it as a way of reducing overhead in the UK with regards to offices and so on, especially in particularly, expensive places like central London and Dublin, potentially, and other city centres. So before I get on to some of the considerations around globally remote workers, and just so you can think through really when you get queries through, what are the kind of things you need to be thinking about. I just wanted to give a quick update regarding Brexit. I had a chat with Mel this morning because obviously, I think the expectation was, at least in most quarters, that a deal of some description would be done. But I think for the first time, I think people are starting to really talk about the fact that, there's a distinct possibility. It seems that a deal may not be done on the Brexit front. I think the only thing that van der Leyen and Boris agreed over their fish dinner last night was the fact that they would stop talking on Sunday and make a decision. So I wanted just to talk about that, what that would mean, particularly for everyone based obviously from a UK point of view, but potentially in any of the European countries. So just very brief bit of background. As part of being in the EU, we are subscribed to an EU regulation 883/2004, which is essentially, it governs social security for people who are living and working cross-border. So that, for example, if you've got somebody who's a UK employee, but they're sent to France for a year or two, where you pay social security is governed by that regulation. And the key thing about it is that it stops contributions being due in both countries, because that would be a nightmare, of course, to sort, because there's no kind of double taxation credit equivalent when it comes to social security. So what you'd end up with is material double social security, which is not good for the employee, of course, but not good for the employer either. So the deal, as it were, the withdrawal agreement has in it essentially what's, is going to have a version of this essentially built into UK law, such that if the deal is signed, then actually things shouldn't change going forward after 31 December of this year. But if we don't have a deal, what that means is, in effect, we fall away out of that particular regulation for social security. And indeed, the UK government has even been sort of preparing for that eventuality now with revocations, etc., to go into our UK law system. So what does that mean for you as employers? And I'm actually dealing with a current case right now, which highlights it. So if you've got, for example, in the case that we're dealing with, it's a UK employer who's got an individual who's going to the Netherlands. It's going to be a secondment starting in March or April next year, and it will be for a couple of years. Normally, under the current rules, you would be able to get a Form A1, it's called, from the UK authorities. And what that does is allows that individual to stay in the national insurance system and to prevent any kind of Dutch social security contributions being required. However, with no deal, what that means is that the UK would still, under our domestic legislation, have the right to NIC for at least the first 52 weeks of that secondment, but the Dutch system would also have the right to impose social security. So you've got a material contribution there. Now, ever the optimist, I don't know about a deal, but I do think that the governments will do something to deal with some of these issues. Why? Because it affects, obviously, inbound people as well coming to the UK from Europe. So it's going to affect Europeans as much as it will affect people on the outbound. So, but I think, you know, if you've got people in this position now, then it's worth taking a look at. One of the things I will say is that if you already got existing arrangements in place and you're already covered by Form A1 prior to 31 December of this year, then you're okay. So this is looking after after the 31 December of this year, and you've got new secondments, or you've got new situations where you've got somebody living and working overseas as a globally remote worker. Potentially, again, depending on that individual's working pattern, you may have dual contributions. So just want to think about if you've got people in that position. So then moving on to really to look at a little bit of detail around globally remote workers. In terms of, you know, payroll, I mean, when people have come to us with queries around globally remote workers, it's often from a payroll point of view to say, you know, do we need to set up payroll in all of these countries overseas? And the answer is often it varies and depends, because whether a payroll is required or not is really dependent on a number of factors, but mainly the tax and social security position and also that country's domestic rules. So it's not like automatically you need to set up a payroll in a country.
The gremlin just got Lee again. Hopefully he'll come back in a second. We'll let him log back in. Oh, is he back? Oh, you go. Sorry, Lee.
Am I here?
Yeah, you are here.
That's all right. Oh, it's just that I've got an unstable connection, but hopefully you can hear me now, right? Okay, excellent. So three big concepts then, just to break down some of the thoughts when you've got people going to work overseas. So the first is permanent establishment. In many territories, whether you need a payroll or not will be determined by whether you've got a corporate presence there. Not always, there are exceptions, and I'll mention those shortly, but it's often determined by whether you've got a corporate presence there. So a lot of people think that means, oh, well, yeah, if I don't register a presence, then I don't have a problem. Well, that's not true, because globally in all tax systems, or the vast majority, there's this concept of permanent establishment. And what that means in essence is that if you've got people working in that country, like you had somebody, let's say you're a UK company with somebody working in India from home, that person could trigger a corporate presence on your behalf just by virtue of the work they're doing. If you don't do anything, no registration or anything, they could trigger a corporate presence. Why is that there? That's there because the Indian authorities want to reserve the right to say, actually, you're operating here as a corporate by virtue of that individual. So that's a consideration. I'll come on to, there's been some relaxations, especially through COVID, which we'll come on to shortly, but that's the first consideration when you're looking at these territories. The second is really whether that country has specific rules with regards to foreign employers. So if you're looking at places like Canada, indeed India as well, Argentina, Jordan, they all have rules, as well as a number of other countries around, if you're a foreign employer with somebody in that territory, then actually there are some registrations you need to go through under our system. So that's also to be sort of checked out. So one of the reviews we did, for example, we did a permanent establishment review across, well, it was 15 different countries. And actually, we determined that the risk of permanent establishment in 12 of them was low to negligible, given that what these individuals did and the local rules, etc. What did that mean from a payroll point of view? That meant that actually that UK employer could simply pay those individuals on a gross basis from the UK, and actually those individuals then would be responsible for settling their own tax overseas, which actually is not a bad situation to be in for the employer. In the 3 territories where a permanent establishment was deemed to have been triggered by those individuals, that then required the setup of a branch, which then required the setup of a payroll in order to withhold in respect of those individuals. So permanent establishment, that's a key thing and shouldn't be overlooked, because it's it can cause real problems if years down the line, you're deemed to have had a PE in territory overseas. The second bit is employment tax and payroll. Obviously, that's the withholding, the social security, and so on. Now, there are many rules around social security, depending on whether you've got agreements with that country, whether you're within the EU, which has its own rules, as I alluded earlier, although perhaps not applying to the UK for much longer. But there are a whole set of rules which drive whether withholding is required in that territory. But in the vast majority of cases, as I said, unless there's a permanent establishment or there's specific rules in that territory, then you don't always need a payroll, and you don't always need to be paying social security in that territory, talking outside of the EU. But one follows the other normally. You start with the corporate, you start with the country rules, then you move on to whether there's payroll and withholding required. So if you get to the point where you've looked at the territory and actually there's no payroll required, it's really not forgetting that actually that individual is more than likely still going to have personal income tax obligations in that territory. And as an employer, I think it's, we've been encouraging employers really just to let their, employees know that so they can, there's no unexpected surprises really. So what have we seen in COVID then? Well, there's been no huge panic for the last 5 or 6 months. I think the organizations which have really been worried about this are those who have like dozens and dozens of people, sometimes into the hundreds of people locked down overseas or now working overseas. Obviously, that's something that needs to be looked at as soon as possible. But people have been a little bit more relaxed over the last 5 or 6 months. Why? Because there's been a relaxation in the treaty guidance from the OECD. Countries have also had relaxations in their rules around residence. The treaty exempts often income tax from taxation in an overseas country where you're there for less than 183 days in a tax year or 12-month period. So there's been generally a feeling of, well, this is short term and then we'll go back to how it was. I think that's well and truly come to an end now. We've seen people overseas for a long time. And if you haven't already, it's definitely something to start looking at now. Have you triggered a PE? Do we have withholding and social security obligations in that territory? Do we need to set up a payroll? Because of course, alongside that, you're also going to have to take into account any UK considerations as well if you're paying them from the UK and still operating pay as you earn and national insurance. Just talking about that UK side, because often we'll get questions about somebody's personal tax position from the employer in the UK. I think the stock advice is, before you've looked at all this and before changing anything because the employee tells you to, or you think you need to do something, at the bottom line, you need to operate what revenue have told you to operate. So, and if you've got a tax code in the UK and you haven't got a Form A1 from another country, or you haven't got any other authority to stop national insurance, then the bottom line is keep operating pay as you earn as normal, keep operating national insurance, because at least you're adhering to what's required of you as an employer. You have to look at everything first to work out then, okay, how do I change this now? Do I need an overseas payroll? Do I need to apply to the revenue for an old tax code? Do I need a Form A1 to stop national insurance? We're talking pre-Brexit, or can I stop national insurance for some other reason? So keep operating before you review it. And I have seen some employers knee-jerk a little bit in response to employees' requests and what they think is the right thing to do. Just covering the points. I think I've covered them. The other point I was going to mention is that countries are starting to lift relaxations where they have had them, and also they don't apply. just because you have relaxations, for example, on residents, it doesn't mean you're not triggering a tax liability overseas. So it's definitely, you should be looking at it now if you've got people who are still working overseas or outside the country where they normally work. So I wanted to just run through some example scenarios because they highlight different things that you might be seeing yourself. So UK employees on secondment to South Africa, and they've actually come back to the UK to work from home. So if the employer is based in the UK and those individuals are working from home, then you're going to re-trigger pay-as-you-earn and potentially national insurance contribution liability as well from a UK point of view. And we have seen people in this situation where they've been working from home for 4 or 5 months, and actually the reality is that's triggered a pay-as-you-earn obligation for the UK employer way back, as well as an NIC contribution. Why? Because that individual is no longer working in South Africa, and also there's no double tax treaty exemption or anything else because the employers here in the UK, they were seconded out. So got to be really careful of that one. I've seen that a lot during the Ebola crisis as well, where people were repatriated to the UK because of Ebola, and the Inland Revenue in the UK will not let people off. They will pick that up as part of a pay-as-you-earn audit. So worth looking, being aware of that one. French national repatriated to France, wants to stay longer term in France. We've seen a few of these. France, aside the tax stuff, in France has particularly stringent labour laws, which, especially if somebody's going to stay there longer term working for a UK organisation, you've got the permanent establishment considerations, you've got tax and social security, you've also got employment law considerations in any country, but France is particularly difficult. So again, that would be something where you'd be looking at France specifically now and saying, okay, what do I need to do there? And how do I set up and manage this now going forward? Doing nothing is going to land you in trouble really as an employee as well. So you'd need to look at it. Organisation with 26 people working in lots of countries. Reviewing every single country from the outset is not practical. It's expensive and just would be too much in many cases, but having a plan and doing like an overarching risk review of those countries at the start to work out where your high, medium, low risks are, to get a plan together, a timetable of what you should do and when, because bear in mind some people might be coming back to the UK, so it's not an issue. So I want to put that in there just to highlight a different approach where you've got lots of people really. Organisation with UK national working from family home in Canada. Yeah, this is actually the CEO of an organisation who's gone to Canada to work from a home there, and they've triggered now, despite Canadian relaxations, they have triggered foreign reporting obligations for the UK employer in Canada. No PE there, no problem with that. But they've triggered foreign reporting obligations in Canada, and a payroll is going to be needed there. So that's a country where mandatory rules apply. Just winding down, I'm conscious of time. So I'm not going to go into this in detail, but I think where you've got lots of people overseas, it's having a risk-based approach and working out a plan. As Rory said earlier, tracking employees is very important. I've got all of my clients who are in this position to basically get their employees to log the days that they're overseas, to make sure we're clear when things started, etc. Understand the position, communicate with employees and work with them to work out what the plan is. Are they coming back? Are they going to stay there? They're going to stay there. What do we need to put in place to manage payroll, etc. going forward? From an employee point of view, I think it starts to open up wider questions now. I think, as I said at the start, notifying accidental remote workers who are relocated because of COVID that they may have a personal tax obligation. Determine whether globally remote working is going to be part of your organization's ethos now going forward. It may or may not be. People have different attitudes to it. Seeking views from employees, I think, is probably an important part of that. I think we've done it in our own organization, and there's a huge array of different views on remote working. In the main, we've found that people want to split. They want a bit of remote working, but a bit of working from home. Impact on recruitment and securing talent. I think a really important point. Again, if you're thinking of, if you're in industries, especially where talent is very short and the specialist skills, having the ability to employ people in another country, or at least the openness to that, is going to become more important, quite frankly, going forward, and definitely something to build in and think about. And then there's wider implications, really, including cost to your organization. Working remotely overseas is expensive. Not least all the payroll stuff, but you've seen all the pre-work that potentially needs to be done to get things set up correctly. It can be expensive, not always, but it can be expensive. And just some of the other considerations when people are working overseas. These aren't kind of, these are tangible kind of risks. We're dealing with a case in France at the moment where, there's been huge delays in getting in place health insurance forms for the individuals based there in France. Now that's a huge issue. If something went wrong with those individuals' health, then there could be a big health bill landing with the UK employer because those contributions haven't been made and the registrations haven't been done. So it is a lot of things to think about, not just outside, not just within tax and social security and payroll, but outside that as well, with employment law, immigration, and health as well. So that was it. A bit of a whistle-stop tour across a huge area. But yeah, I'll take any questions if anyone has any.
Thanks, Lee. Does anybody have any questions? I know this has been a topic that a lot of people have been talking about within the payroll industry.
I do have one actually, Lee. So obviously, most people go and seek advice on these individually. But say, for example, you're a small business and you had, a couple of examples in your own business, but you might not necessarily want to go and engage tax advice straight away. Is there anywhere that would document what these countries' requirements are? Quite simply, like, you just mentioned there Canada's got reporting because of the CEO. Is there any kind of directory or just a breakdown of what these countries expect? Because I imagine everyone's different.
It's a good question, and I think a good place to start would be the Foreign Tax Authority's website, because often they will have information on there. I know, for example, the Canadian website will detail the foreign employer reporting obligations and what needs to happen and when. Not all websites are that great, and some, it's either you'd have to interpret the information or it just wouldn't be there. So, but that would be my starting point initially. And then, just Google what's out there. I mean, the downside of that, of course, is in number one with the websites is you're relying on your interpretation of that information. You don't know what all the rules are, the context or anything else. The second bit with Googling, of course, is that the information might not be right or apply to your context and so on. So both of those have big drawbacks, but absolutely, I think one thing, especially with small businesses, what I would say is a halfway house to those kind of things is educate yourself first by going through that process and then could go into advisors with the right questions. So, what costs is when somebody comes to an advisor with an open-ended, I've got this scenario, can you sort it out? Because you have to delve right into the detail and understand the context and everything else. If somebody's educated themselves already and they know what the kind of issues are, then they'll just come with some very defined bits that they want you to look at. And that can be much more cost effective.
No, great point. Thank you.
Okay, so we're just going to take a 5-minute comfort break. I'm going to put you into some breakout rooms because we did promise that we would allow you guys to network with each other. So hopefully you'll all have your cameras on, and we'll see you shortly in about 5 minutes. Okay, I think, Hayley and I are in I'm on my own. Hello, Mark, I'm with you. Hello, everyone. Did anybody get to speak to anyone? I can't hear anybody. Can anybody hear me?
Yeah, you're fine, Mel.
That's all right. You can't get rid of me. Honestly, I was thinking, how's it going to work? Are people going to stay on? I've definitely had enough of technology for 2020. Hi, Ricardo. Nice to see you. Hi, Andrea. Nice to see you as well. Oh, we've got loads more people here. Hello. Did you get to talk to each other at all?
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yes, we
Oh.
did.
Did I finish it a bit too early?
No, it's okay.
Oh, sorry. I didn't gauge that one very well. So next time I'll do it a bit longer then, maybe. Did you all get a message to say that I was closing it? Oh, you did?
Yes.
Yes.
And it was timed. So it was like going time into, you're moving now.
Oh, really? Well, it wouldn't
Yeah.
put me into a room, so I was sitting there on my own. I felt a bit lonely. So, anyway,
Yeah.
the story of my life. Right, so as I mentioned earlier, we've got Andrew here. So Andrew wowed the judges with his nomination and what you've done really this year, I think. And it's and I hope to have another webinar with Andrew so we can go into a bit more detail about what he's done, but he's going to give us a bit of an overview on what you've done recently and with Hong Kong in particular. And it'd be great if anybody has anything or any questions, you know, please feel free to you know, engage with Andrew. So thank you so much, Andrew. Are you happy to start?
Yep, go for it.
Fabulous. And I will make myself quiet.
Okay. Cool. So good, Mel, because everything's gone just to my presentation for me.
It's perfect.
Perfect, great, let's crack on. So thank you very much, Mel. Yes, so my name is Andrew. I work for Cambridge Education Group, and as Mel said, we recently won the Transformation of the Year award at the GPA Awards, which we're overwhelmed about. It was great, and actually Immedis sponsored that award for us as well, so thank you very much for sponsoring that award. I thought I'd speak to you a little bit today about what we kind of tackled in the COVID crisis and how that's helped us kind of enable business growth, but also really focus on the employee experience that our employees receive, because, you know, as you've already heard from the previous two speakers, that's a huge thing that we're looking at today, and I think it actually fits in quite nicely with some of the things that have already been said. So I'm not going to kind of labour the point, because I think everyone is cool knows this. Payroll during COVID-19 has been interesting. We've all got risen to the challenge. We've all done an incredible job this year. Obviously, a lot of the pre-COVID processes, such as getting new starter information, bank information, tax filings, audit evidence, pension correspondence, especially in the UK or social security, you know, anywhere pretty much, has a very rigid pre-COVID process. The impacts on those processes have been huge. We've had absence in our own teams. We've had location, as we've heard, people working in other countries, people working all over the place. Access to paper records has been non-existent. I've not been allowed in my office. Actually, my office has moved since I was last in it, so I don't know where anything is. So I hope I don't get any asked for any paper records, because I won't be finding them. Printing, I can print at home, but you know, I don't want to be printing reams of paper on my small little printer I have at home. Even posting stuff is a bit of a challenge, and obviously we all miss a bit of face-to-face working. So when we look at how that adapts to COVID-19, the governments and the social security organisations and even pension companies are all pretty much in the same boat and can sympathise with us. They kind of like change their practices to allow us to maybe have a little bit of leeway, change the way we file things, not have to keep records for as long. But one group of, and probably our biggest client group, the employees, don't have that same sympathy for us, or perhaps if they did have any leeway in terms of COVID-19, the stage of the pandemic we are now at means that that's kind of going. I know from my own personal experiences when I go to shops at the moment or something like that, the amount of times I hear the COVID excuse, or I recently had an issue with a hotel and I phoned up and they phoned up the customer helpline, and the recorded message was, due to COVID-19, we're not answering phone calls, goodbye, and hung up. So those COVID-19 sort of excuses are wearing thin, and it's about how we can change what we do before COVID-19, improve it, and actually keep those improvements. That's because they're going to make things better in the long run as well. So when I started putting this presentation together, and when I started even thinking about just basically what we needed to do this year in Cambridge Education Group to achieve what we wanted to do, which was basically grow as a business overseas during COVID, I kind of thought, what was so great about pre-COVID anyway? For us, it wasn't that great, and we knew we had to change. We had paper new starter forms, paper payroll forms. We had a bureau form for some certain payrolls in other countries, and that were photocopied upon photocopy, because people just thought there was a bit of information that wasn't really needed. A burger service number to someone outside of payroll means nothing. IT equipment processes were, they were there, but they were face-to-face IT equipment processes. They weren't remote. Inductions were done kind of on a centre-by-centre basis, and compliance correspondence, so such as things like pension letters, someone would print them out one day of the month and send them out in the post from the office. So how do we fix that in a COVID environment when we don't have access to that? Of course, all those things there are really important that we get that information, but the way we were collecting that information is really poor. It's going to cause issues with the accuracy of the data and the input. The first payroll of that employee, we already heard the quote earlier about that it takes 2 payrolls to start making someone think about another job. Well, when we get the accuracy of the data and input from a paper form incorrect because we've read a digit wrong or we've read a letter wrong, and their first ever payslip is incorrect, then that's going to be an even more damaging experience. And overall, actually, all these forms here, they're kind of transactional. Do any of them actually think about how the employee feels about filling them in? So on their first day, they come in and they're greeted to a mounting of paperwork, or can we do something different to enable that experience to be a bit more streamlined, a bit more dynamic for how the business is, and actually solve the COVID challenge at the same time? So I want to talk to you about a recent case study we've had in Cambridge Education Group, which was Hong Kong. We expanded to Hong Kong in 2019, and I was called into a meeting probably back in June, maybe July. This year's gone very quick, so excuse me for not remembering the exact month, but we were told that we needed to open a new Hong Kong office, 20 to 25 new employees. We were moving at quite a significant chunk of our operation from the UK to Hong Kong because it better serves the customers that we have, who tend to be in the Asia economy rather than being in the European one. We had a new office that we were going to have to get fitted out. We needed a new business registration. We needed a new employment contract because the last time we did any employment in Hong Kong, it had some advice, but it wasn't, probably I wouldn't want to recruit a large amount of people on it without getting new advice. We needed to ensure payroll compliance. We needed to get payroll training, which we obviously did for the GPA. We needed to source some payroll software, MPF funds, you name it. But the biggest thing that kept me kind of awake and also thinking about how we're going to crack this is, although we were using a recruitment partner in Hong Kong, we were asking people in the COVID year to leave a job in a very uncertain time and come and join a company they probably never heard of us before. And I thought, if someone in a non-COVID time, I can probably understand someone making that jump quite rationally and thinking, got a new job in a new company, they're setting up in Hong Kong. In a COVID situation, I'm probably thinking they've got a few more queries in their head about what that's going to be like, how they're going to do it, who even is this company, is it going to be secure, are they going to still be here in a year? So we brought all that into kind of thinking about how can we make something that's going to enable growth, but also be great for the employee. All while we could actually go over there. There was a travel ban in place, and luckily we had one employee on the ground from our previous Hong Kong business who actually had to facilitate everything for us because we couldn't travel over there to actually see the new office or set up any of the new business aspects. So we saw this as a huge opportunity for change. Pre-COVID, we knew the change was needed, as I already mentioned, and COVID helped guide a few more of the journey requirements. So making that journey seamless from recruitment to welcome, giving the confidence to the employee from the experience, allow these changes that we're making to continue to allow for remote working because it's becoming a feature of how we work. A lot of the UK recruitment we do now is actually home-based. So how can we make sure that these remote processes allow that to continue and don't actually become a hinder the process at all? It needs to work for all the business locations, so all the countries we're operating around the world, but at the same time bring all the business closer together. And the Hong Kong was a great opportunity for us, because what it allowed us to do is it allowed us to show one part of the business completely from setup, this new process in place and working, and then also be able to get feedback from those employees who've only known this new process, as opposed to people that we were going to have to put through a change process in order to do that. You can see there we put just a bit of a graphic about how we were talking about all the different journeys of the employee and how they all fit together within the company. But the crux of it here, and the payroll aspect is it all starts with payroll and it all ends with payroll. It's all about reward and making sure that's accurate and correct. But what we do is we try and link up with as many different departments as we do these changes in the business to try and get engagement and get these changes kind of bought into by the majority of the business. So how did we make the journey look for the employee? We decided to basically call this process the welcome. And we did a load of personalized emails to kind of welcome that employee to the business, congratulate them on their offer. As we used a recruitment partner, they didn't actually kind of have any sort of interaction through our website when they recruited. So this was all kind of the first kind of information they got from us. And we wanted it to be as welcoming, friendly, and helpful as possible. We set up an onboarding portal. We provided welcome messages with COVID. We talked about COVID in them. We also made how-to videos, so explained how that onboarding was going to work, and also showed them click by click what they needed to do. And for our people that started right at the beginning of it, we also provided information about how their first week would look, to kind of break down any of those barriers or worries that you may have about joining a new business, but also especially in the COVID time that we talked about. So onboarding, what we built here was a tool that allowed us to create a checklist for each of the countries we work in. And that checklist we can then build to the specific payroll requirements of each country. Hong Kong was a really good country to do this on, because obviously they don't withhold tax. There isn't tax codes or anything like that. There's just information such as the Hong Kong ID, the names and addresses that we're going to need, and any bank account details. However, we've been able to develop these checklists since into other countries such as the Netherlands, Sweden, and the US, so that we capture all the information we need for that to process payroll for that particular employee. Rather than just making onboarding about payroll and just having it as a very transactional, complete this form, thank you, you're done, we also added a lot of employee experience elements to it. We added information about the company, we created videos, we created guides and little helpful hints and tips about their first week to again break down those barriers about and make that person feel connected to the company during COVID. It doesn't feel like to the employee that they're just providing some payroll information to us. For me, selfishly, I want this information to be as accurate as possible and inputted by the employee. But to other parts of the business, such as IT and HR, they want the ability to talk to the employees like this at this stage, and it kind of shows all the company coming together and using that synergy to build on that experience, but also ensure that we get everything we need to pay them accurately. It also allows for central oversight, so we can see at a glance who out of the people that we're recruiting hasn't completed this information, and perhaps we can reach out to them or maybe even phone them a bit more personally and see what's up and if they need any assistance. To bring everything together, we also created a welcome pack. We created both digital and physical copies. Hong Kong, at the time we opened this part of the business, was actually out of lockdown, so it meant that all our employees could go into the office. One of the things that we find when people start is they all tend to ask the same sort of questions, and they all struggle to find the same sort of information. So we created a welcome pack which kind of answered all those questions, welcomed them to the company, explained who we were, but also told them things like what's their email address, what's their phone number, how do I go around raising an IT ticket. All those handy hints and tips are within this pack that they can either have digitally or physically, depending on how they're employed or in the business. We also included checklists, which again, selfishly for payroll, help us ensure that certain things are done in the right order and completed by the line manager. The amount of times you sometimes have to send a friendly reminder to a line manager in the business to ask them whether they've completed something, this checklist kind of helps preempt that email you're going to send and lets them complete that as a step-by-step task. We also built into this the probation process as well, so that again, when we get that probation paperwork back at the end of the probation, we can process that nice and easily in payroll. So the result of all this work meant that we did have a new team. They were all onboarded and contracted before they started. We completed remote business inductions with people across the world. That's something we've continued as well. So every week we run a global induction where people from no matter what business location they're in, whether that's the UK, Hong Kong, China, they all come onto an induction together and they have that induction and meet each other. So we kind of break down those borders in terms of meet and greet. We had an on-time payroll. We completed all our MPF paperwork and our inland revenue submissions. And we also got their private medical scheme set up in time. And as a result of that, was a happy, well-embedded team in the business who are now well on their way to kind of completing the process of moving that function from the UK to Hong Kong. And there's some photos there of the team on their first day. And they love the welcome pack so much, I even got sent for some photos of it on the day they started with it. So once we learned about Hong Kong and how well that process can work and how slick we can make it, we've obviously decided to put those learnings into our other worldwide locations. We've been building compliant payroll checklists for each location to put into the onboarding tool. We constantly look to improve as we deploy to more regions and work out what more we can do, what more resource can we put on there to help the employee experience, as well as gaining feedback from people that have been through the new process. But the most important thing as well is we don't just kind of make it all shiny and new for the people that have just started with the business. We are constantly looking at improving all the processes that exist throughout. So improving our other processes, so our current employees, you can see improvements in how we process things, but also so that the people who've just started with us don't kind of fall off this cliff of everything's nice and easy for them to suddenly having to deal with issues that may come up. So things such as we're introducing interactive pay slips in the next couple of months, which will mean that an employee can go onto their pay slip and hover their mouse over each element, and it will show them information about how that element was calculated, how we got to that number. If they've got any overtime, it will say the exact time and dates that overtime was worked, so that it helps them understand their pay better and gives them further insight. And then other things we've done to add to the experience as well, further development, is how do we make some of those processes that I said at the beginning were challenges in COVID-19 and get rid of them forever? So one of the things we've been looking at is automatic mailing. So we use a company called Stamp, which is in the UK, and I know they operate in the US as well. I'm sure there's other direct mail platforms out there that can do a similar thing, but allows us to integrate to that system automatically and create automated mailings. So for example, one of the things we've looked at doing is every time someone accepts a job offer of us, we send them a little welcome card in the post from the line manager to kind of remind them that they need to go into the onboarding portal and complete that information for us. But it's also a nice way to bring them into the experience of the business. It also allows us to automate pension mailings. So one of the things that we said was an issue during COVID-19 was the ability to get those letters out in a timely fashion. Well, actually now the integration with our payroll system allows us to do that automatically. And to the cost of what is less than a stamp in the UK, that letter is printed and put in an envelope and sent out in the post without any human intervention on our end. We're building further integrations to our international payroll software, such as Numbers, which have their own onboarding tools as well. And just starting to make sure that we continue to build that seamless flow into one stage of an employee's journey to the other. So in summary, some of the things that we've learned out of COVID-19 is we can push any change through if we make it about the experience. If we're doing it, let's make sure we also focus on the employee's experience as well. We could have just fixed the pension letters, but actually we fixed a lot more because that's the right thing to do, and actually it's going to have more longevity than just fixing a transactional issue. We found out that if we make something COVID resilient, it's going to bring improvement as a start for 10. It makes expansion simpler to other countries in the world because now all we'll have to do is add to our list of compliant payroll checklists on that tool, which will then mean that we can start to look to grow into other countries as and when the business decides to do that. I suppose the biggest call outs for us is we don't want to revert back. We want to use this opportunity to get through our change barriers that we have and not make it all about payroll. Sometimes if you say, oh, we need to do this because it's easier for us in payroll, people kind of switch off. It's about how do we kind of show the business that we can facilitate change. So we need this information to be compliant, but if you come along with us and develop this tool with us, actually you can make your journey for that employee so much better as well. Especially like IT departments is a really good one to bring everything into because they again have loads of recurring themes that they have with new starters, if you can solve them in that experience along with your payroll issues, you've got a lot more people sponsoring you in the business to get this change pushed through. Continually seek improvements in all the processes. And the final one for me, and I think it's quite a big one, is the amount of reduced wasted paper we have in payroll now, and the less resource and time we're taking up to do some of these things, which would have, even before pre-COVID, took up a lot of time. So it was just kind of wanted to share with you some of the things that we've done this year to, one, get over COVID, but also two, help us get better at expanding in other countries and continue to grow as a business. So happy to take any questions anyone has on any of that at all, or any of the things we've done.
Thanks, Andrew. That's really, really, really interesting and useful as well. Got some good tick lists there. Does anybody have any questions at all? No? Okay. Well, thank you very much, Andrew. If anybody does have any questions sort of post-event, then you've got my email address, so please feel free to get in contact. I suppose we're coming to an end. What I will do, if people, I know everyone's busy, this is like the busiest time I think for everybody in payroll in December. I will put you all in breakout rooms, so if anybody does want to carry on just for 10 minutes or so, if you did want to talk to anyone, you're welcome to, so I'll just leave that running for a few minutes. But thank you, Rory. I can see you there on the screen. Thank you so much for supporting us today, and we've got quite a few initiatives next year, so I look forward to working with you in 2021, and hopefully we can meet in person.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Thanks a million, Mel, for organising it. It's always our pleasure. You do all the hard work, so have a good Christmas. Hopefully you get a break.
It's been a bit of a challenge in December, I will say. Thank you for that.
Thank
you for those that have joined us today. So we're coming to an end, but what I will do, I'll put you all out in breakout rooms just for 10 minutes. You don't have to join, but if you do, because I finished it a bit earlier, then please feel free to network with people for a little bit longer. But thank you again, Rory, and thank you to all the other speakers, Andrew and Lee as well.